And this is the installer, this is not the source code for it, okay? And I click next, and I am working in DNN5 here, so we're going to see a little bit of new stuff on the install wizard. So here's the package information. They call it a package now instead of a well, they used to just call it a manifest, I guess. But you can add some additional information now. For example, release notes go here. There is a license, and if you actually have a license involved, it makes the user click the I agree button. And
it's not just for modules either. So if you're a skin developer, you can have a license for your skins too.
Yep. So that stuff, I haven't put that stuff. Well, that's not in this FAQs module that comes the core module yet. All right. So now what it's done is it's gone through. If you see anything red here, you know you're in trouble, but it actually installed just fine, no problem here. So now what I can do is go back to a page, say the home page, and it's not going home here. Come on.
Oh, it's at the initial rebuild.
Yeah, it always takes a long time.
Right after it.
Now I can put like the FAQs module appears here, and I can actually install it. You know, like say at the top of my content pane, so that we can see it up here. Did I miss it? Oh, all right. For some reason I was thinking this was the top pane that they put that in.
Oh.
FAQs, so there's no top pane here apparently. So there's the FAQs module is installed. So that's what happens. That's the user experience that somebody sees when they install your custom module. Right? They just get your install file, walk through that little installer, and hopefully everything is good. If you've done your homework, there's nothing red on that page when they install it, and you see your status. Okay, so let's hop back quickly then to the slides. Walk through a few more items here. And unfortunately, because I am not installing DotNetNuke from scratch, I don't have an empty portal sitting here. So what you're going to watch me clear a portal real quick so I can put my source code into it. But that's all good. It's part of the learning process. You get to see some of the nuts and bolts behind this. All right, so Visual Studio environment for DNN5. So, pick your operating system. I'm using Vista, and there's a couple of special things about working in Vista, and that's why I like demoing with it, because, for example, you have to run Visual Studio as an administrator if you're using IIS. And you want to use IIS, not Cassini, because Cassini is not stable enough. All right, so Visual Studio 2008, you can still use 2005, but drop it, get 2008. You can do everything in 2008 that you could in 5 and more. All right, so you can use the .NET Framework 2 to 3.5, whatever. Kind of, depending on if you want to use Link in your module, for example, you got to use 3.5. Just be aware, though, that nobody can install that module on their machine unless they're running Framework 3.5 already. So you have to think about what kind of module you're building on. Let me address that in just a second. So then SQL Server, you can still use 2005, 2008. You can use Express Order. I recommend the Developer Edition if you're doing serious development because you can run, it's full SQL Server. So I'm using Vista, Visual Studio 2008, SQL Server 2005 on this machine. 2008 just came out. I haven't got myself converted yet. You also need IIS, and if you want to send email, you need SMTP, or as Will showed in the last session, I didn't realize you could actually use one of your own, like an external email. But install SMTP if you're, for development on your own machine. So if you're going to be building modules from scratch, you want to install the starter kit, and that gives you some project templates, and we'll look at that toward the end of the talk. And then basically you're going to configure DNN, and you want to use the install package. Do not use the source package DNN. All right? If you're doing custom module development, you don't want to inadvertently change something in the DNN core. Right? Plus, your projects are going to start up a whole lot faster if you don't have all that baggage of .NETNuke's 30-something projects behind it. So use the install version of DNN and do your module development locally. If you want .NETNuke source for reference, install a separate portal using the source and use it as a reference portal that you can step through. All right, so keep them separate. That's my opinion on how you should go at it. So then there's a couple of tags, the object qualifier, the database owner. Okay, these are things to help primarily in hosted situations. The object qualifier, the database owner is like DDO, but it can be whatever is required by your host. And then the object qualifier, what that does is, in a shared hosting environment where your host is sharing a SQL Server database between your portals and other people's portals, you want to be sure to put an object qualifier in there so that your users table is not the same as everybody else's users table. You want to have, like in my case, I use VNE, which is VNet Expert, my website. I use VNE underscore for my object qualifier, so that my tables are named VNE underscore users or whatever. So this is in your web config file, and you'll see in the database scripts in a little bit that these tags appear, but you want to consider how you want to use these things. By default, database owner is set to DDO, and object qualifier is empty string. So these become very important as a module developer to understand what they are. So let's talk about DNN in design mode now. So I'm going to walk through, do all this stuff, and show you. So the first thing I'm going to do is install a module source package. And what you typically have to do then, so you download one of the core modules like the FAQ module as the module source now instead of the install. The first thing you have to do is edit the project file for the URL that's in there, all right, because their URL is not going to be the same as your URL that you're using for development. And then you're going to open the solution and check references. All right, so that's typical that you have to do. If you take somebody else's solution, you got to check references always. All right, so that's kind of the module source package scenario. If you're creating a new module project, all right, you've already got the starter kit installed. The project templates are in Visual Studio for that. All right, so you're going to start a project. You're going to run your database scripts. You're going to test them. You're going to add your module definitions and test those. And then ultimately, whichever route you take, whether you're starting with an existing module or you're creating something from scratch, you're going to start to run this thing in design mode. So you've got to obviously set your project debug mode so it'll work. And the project itself has to be debug mode, plus there's a compilation debug that is true in the web config file. And then basically all you do is you start up your portal in IE or whatever your browser is, and you use tools attach process to the ASP.NET Worker process. All right, so you don't run the project because all you've got is a little user control project. That's your custom module. It doesn't really run. Okay, you run your portal and you connect to it, and when it steps into your module in the portal, you get into design mode. So let's see that in action. This is very simple once you see somebody else do it. Trying to figure out how to do it yourself for the first time, there's lots of hours spent in search and forums and asking your friends. Okay, so we're going to hop over here.
Or going to a user group.
Yes, go ahead. Will runs the Orlando DNN group, if everybody didn't already know that. Sorry. So that's actually a very good plug. So what I'm going to do here as a starting point is I'm going to go to the module definitions page, and I'm going to uninstall my module that I'm about to install. And actually, it's already been uninstalled. Nice. Okay, so yeah, all right, I remember what happened. I got screwed up the other night, and I was trying to fix something very quickly and ended up screwing up my whole development environment. So what I'm going to do is just navigate down here. All right. So what I always do is I always create a directory. Now, when Will installed DNN, he probably said that there were approximately 4 things that you have to do. One is you have to set permissions in the directories. Okay. One is that you have to create an empty database. One is you have to create your IIS settings, for your portal definition, whether it's a website or a virtual directory or whatever. And then you typically have to do a little bit of web config settings like for your database connection strings, although that's now in the module, in the portal install. You can do that through the install screen. You don't have to edit web config manually. All right. So what I do is I create a directory, and I just call it DNN. And I set the permissions on that DNN directory for ASP.NET or network service or whichever account is used when you run IIS. And I just set it to full permissions. And then I set it to inherit every directory that's created. So every one of my portals that I build, I get the same permissions into. Okay, so I don't have to worry about directory permissions every time I do something. All right, so I'm going to just go into this portal here and do this manually. So desktop modules.